We're concerned about injustices that the youth are having to deal with, because when they look and see what the older generations are going through and then trying to tell them about trusting in the system, it's a very difficult thing to do.
Tonight, as protesters continue to sound off about the grand jury decision in the Eric Garner case, people in Brooklyn are now gathering to remember Akai Gurley. The 28-year-old Gurley was shot and killed by an NYPD officer in the stairwell of a Brooklyn housing complex. Police say Gurley was accidentally shot by a rookie cop, and there is word today that Brooklyn DA Ken Thompson will bring this case to a grand jury. Tonight, our Dominic Carter is live in Brooklyn outside of the Brown Memorial Baptist Church, where funeral services for Gurley are set to begin in just a little bit. Dominic, you also spoke with Congressman Charlie Rangel earlier today.
Indeed, Andrew. This funeral begins, we are told, at the top of the hour for Mr. Gurley at 7 p.m. But tonight, we sat down with the dean of the New York congressional delegation, Congressman Charles Rangel. We wanted to talk about alleged police brutality, about the Eric Garner case. And no matter what question, Andrew, we put to Congressman Rangel, who was quite emotional and candid in terms of how he feels, he returned to the issue of race. Congressman Rangel, I start with someone you know very well, Congressman Peter King of Long Island. He said on Twitter, quote, "You had a 350-pound person who was resisting arrest." Is Congressman King correct here?
I have no idea. He must have said more than that, because...
Well, he did. He went on to say that Mr. Garner was obese and that his asthma played a role and that he feels compassion for the Garner family, but all of these things play a role. And he also said that he thanked the grand jury for not yielding to outside pressure.
I don't know where we got to go with this, Dominic. First of all, Congressman King is a dear friend of mine. I don't know anything about his medical background. I have no idea what that is relevant to. A man was killed, and there were 5 or 6 policemen around him, and obviously he didn't commit suicide. And so the grand jury is supposed to find out what happened. And so that is why we have the federal government, Department of Justice, and we're going to find out what happened. And the fact that someone is overweight doesn't mean that that's an invitation to be killed.
You believe there's no doubt, even though there's a much higher threshold for the feds to bring a possible civil rights case, you do believe the feds are going to go forward?
I know one thing. Unlike Staten Island, we will have an objective prosecutor presenting the facts to the grand jury after investigation. They have to investigate before they find out that there's facts to bring. But one thing is abundantly clear, that in the face of popular opinion, an outrage has been committed against a human being, and no explanation has been given for it. That grand jury testimony has to be released. We have to find out which side was the district attorney on? Which side was he on? You know, it's supposed to be a search for the truth. You just can't say, no bill. Did he ask for an indictment? We don't know. So this is nowhere near over, believe me.
Congressman Rangel, are you questioning how Staten Island District Attorney Dan Donovan handled this case?
I don't know what he did internally. All I know is that he has not displayed how he handled the case. It's outrageous that what he is doing is secret. We're not talking about just what the grand jury has done. What the heck did he do? Like I said, which side was he on? So, listen, I'm not the least bit concerned about him. This is just one of the many points of racism that exist in this country. It could very well be that the same way the attacks by dogs on human beings during the Civil Rights Movement, the bombing of kids in a church, the murder of the 3 freedom riders that we had in Mississippi, how that opened up people's eyes to recognize that this was not a crime just against black people. It was a crime against humanity, a crime against what America believes in. And maybe because the offense was so horrendous and seen on video by so many people, maybe because people white and black and brown are marching, maybe because the tourists who came here to look at the Christmas tree being lit and saw this as an emotional issue, maybe this great country of ours would recognize that the stigma of slavery still lives in this country.
Congressman Rangel, maybe I'm not interpreting correctly what you just said, but it sounds like you said that this amounts to an attack on black people.
You can use your words. I'm just saying that there's hardly any question in anybody's mind that these shootings of young black people and the way Gardner had been treated and the way Brown had been treated just does not occur with white people. And so when I say racism, you bet your life, I don't know how I can be more clear. We have an epidemic of the security of young black people, especially black males in this country. Now, let's just sign off on that and move on. That's not challenged by anybody. And when the President of the United States, who has black children, and the mayor of the city of New York, who has black children, that the record is clear. The question, and the only question, is what are we going to do about this?
Congressman Rangel, the police unions have said, you just brought up the mayor, they have said that the mayor has gone too far with this in terms of tilting towards the protesters and those that are upset about this, and that the mayor of New York has to be a bit more objective in this process.
You know, I like Pat Lynch. He was elected to protect the rights of the uniformed police officers. But I told him, if every time an allegation is made, he sees no merit at all, one day a good cop is going to be falsely accused, and he's going to be defending them, and they're just going to say, there go Pat Lynch again. You got to be even-handed and fair. And he should recognize that as much as the community need good policemen, and we're fortunate to have a good police force, that police force to be effective needs a community that has confidence in them. And him ranting and raving and attacking may make the people in uniform feel good, but it's not improving the relationship between the community and those who serve us.
Congressman Rangel, you well know you're a former prosecutor yourself, but what should the NYPD, this is not over as far as now internally with the NYPD. He's been cleared by a grand jury, but there's still the NYPD. What should the NYPD do with Officer Pantaleo? Putting the feds and their investigation aside, but do you see a scenario where one day he could return to duty?
First of all, I've talked with Commissioner Bratton, and it's clear that now that the grand jury case is over, the police department is moving on their investigation to determine whether he violated any rules of the department. And so his tenure as a policeman is yet to be determined, and the final say on that will be the police commissioner. But where I thought you were going with the police department is to realize that most of the young people that volunteer to become a policeman are pretty courageous people. They're willing to put their lives on the line to protect you and to protect me. And I would even go as far as to say that when these atrocious acts are being committed by a police officer, I think most of the policemen find it very uncomfortable as professionals. Why is it that it's reported, at least, that the district attorney would give immunity to all of the policemen except the one that had the chokehold? Do you have any idea why immunity is given?
You're the lawyer, I'm not. I can only imagine that he felt that his only possible case was against Pantaleo.
Wait a minute now. What you're saying, I think, is that these people refused to testify unless immunity was given because their testimony might cause them to be charged with a crime. That's what immunity is all about. And so what it means is that it's not just the perpetrator, it's those that have taken an oath to support the law are allowing the silent wall, or the blue wall of silence, to keep them from doing the right thing. That means that when they see these things being done, you and I have an obligation to say, stop, enough is enough. And so we're not just talking about those people who manage to get on the police department who are mentally ill and lack a sense of self-esteem, so they have to find some way to give vent to their feelings. We're not talking about these sick people. We're talking about the people around them that don't have the courage enough to stand up and say, not on my police force do you do that. That's what we're talking about.
Congressman Rangel, I close this way. Last night, the protest with a few thousand people at Foley Square, I interviewed City Councilman Jumaane Williams, and he said, I asked him about potential of civil disobedience over the Brooklyn Bridge. As you know, the police stood down and did not block the protesters from going over the bridge. But his position, the councilman, was that he advocates in a case like this for civil disobedience. Is it responsible for an elected official to urge people in the name of protests to confront police and get arrested?
If there is a moral question and you feel strong enough about it that you're willing to get arrested and not cause harm to anyone as a result of it,
like you did with Diallo?
Yeah, it's an obligation to say, hey, of course you arrest me. I've been to jail for apartheid in South Africa. I've been to jail for Diallo. And it's only been, I just want the attention being focused on why I went to jail. Not that it's a profile encouraging me. I knew I'd be out in a few hours. So I knew I wasn't going to be in jail long. But I wanted to focus attention on what has happened.
So you are backing civil disobedience. Is that what you're saying?
I don't back anything unless I know the reason for it. I mean, I think you can sock somebody in the eye, but I don't back it unless that person deserves being hit in the eye. And when we find in America people who are the beneficiaries of all of this benefit are anxious to deny someone else the same thing, they should be chastised in some kind of way. You know, I try to make it easy by saying, when a child is blessed to be born in the United States of America, that baby has no idea about who to hate, what language not to like, what color is unpopular. Some Americans who happen to be their parents poison them. That poison is a cancer to our country. And it hasn't been too long ago that we were brought over here in chains and picking cotton. We know people who are still alive that remember it. And lest you forget, young man, it hasn't been that long ago that Lyndon Johnson said you were entitled to vote. You were entitled to have civil rights. And the Supreme Court agreed. And so racism just didn't happen overnight, and it's not going away overnight. It's a cancer on the body of this great republic. And anybody that doesn't want to go in and get rid of it, they don't love this country.
An interesting conversation with the Dean of New York's congressional delegation, Harlem Congressman Charles Rangel. In conclusion here, Andrew, this starts at the top of the hour, and at the beginning of your show tonight, we spoke live with the pastor of this church, Clinton Miller. A bit subdued here in Brooklyn. The NYPD has already closed the street both ways for this event being held tonight. A lot of community affairs cops out here, a lot of police officers from the media unit of the police department. That is it for now. Reporting live from Brooklyn, I'm Dominic Carter. Andrew, let's go back to you.
Anger and frustration on the streets of New York, Dominic, and from Charlie Rangel. Great job there, Dominic. Thanks very much. Now, other politicians from both sides of the aisle are also sounding off about the case, as are some political pundits.
You had a 350-pound person who was resisting arrest. The police were trying to bring him down as quickly as possible. If he had not had asthma and a heart condition and was so obese that almost definitely he would not have died from this, the police had no reason to know that he was in serious condition.
Some politician put a tax of $5.85 on a pack of cigarettes, so they've driven cigarettes underground by making them so expensive. But then some politician also had to direct the police to say, hey, we want you arresting people for selling a loose cigarette. And for someone to die over, breaking that law, there really is no excuse for it. But I do blame the politicians. We put our police in a difficult situation with bad laws.
Yes, he should not have resisted. But all Americans, every one of us, should pity Mr. Garner and his family. He did not deserve what happened to him. And I think Officer Pantaleo and every other American police officer, every one, would agree with me. He didn't deserve that.
I'm very pleased that the Department of Justice will be investigating what happened in Ferguson or Staten Island. Those families and those communities and our country deserve a full and fair accounting, as well as whatever substantive reforms are necessary to ensure equality, justice, and respect for every citizen.
So some reaction there. Interesting, the comments from Bill O'Reilly, perhaps a little bit unexpected, but we saw this also after Ferguson. I'm used to seeing a political divide in this country, liberal, conservative. It seems like there's a divide on these kinds of issues also, that, we really are a divided nation in just how we see each other in incidents like this.
That's true. I was on camera yesterday talking to someone about this, and I used the example that he was Italian, he loves his Italian heritage, and a lot of decisions he makes comes from that point of view. When you have hundreds of years, and certainly within the last several decades, you have communities that have undergone significant patterns of injustice, where almost every government institution has underserved them or not served them. That is a perspective from which we speak. And if I want to get to know him, or he wants to get to know me, we have to talk about it. But we live in an extraordinarily segregated society, and those conversations don't take place.
And we keep talking about these conversations that we have to have, but if there's already such a divide going in, it seems like that's almost impossible to reach some sort of consensus or make some change.
Well, it's extremely difficult because it's ingrained in some people, and it requires a complete turnaround. But it does require discussion. It requires legitimate, balanced, serious discussions about how we view race, how we view all people of color in this country, and how we handle them. And that's not just the police, that's across the board. But I think there's optimism from these tragedies, which they were. There will be something that happens, and I'm thinking it'll be to the betterment. It's a conversation that requires a lot of time, and unfortunately we're out of time in this segment. Up next, Councilman Jumaane Williams speaks out about the protest and protesters. He tells RFL that they have his full support, but is there a fine line there? Also, Mayor Bill de Blasio's recent statements about the police has the union sounding off. We're getting to both topics next.